Okay.
Yes. Okay. Good morning to Dr. Boensel. Good morning to people who are joining us live or rewatching this later. My name is Elena Kolbrecht, and I am the Executive Director of the Samuel Vargas International Music Foundation. This is the first interview I've had the pleasure to be a part of. So I am very happy to be here along with Dr. Marc Boensel and Samuel himself to introduce Dr. Boensel a little bit, and then he will share more about himself. He is an oboist, conductor, teacher, professor. He currently holds positions as the music director at St. Luke's here in Columbus, Georgia. He is also the assistant conductor of the Albany Symphony in Albany, Georgia, and he is a part-time faculty member at the Schwob School of Music, which is how Samuel and I know him. So thank you for being with us, Dr. Boensel, so much appreciated from all of us. And if you could, please share with us a little bit about what brings you here today at the point you are in your career and what sorts of things and experiences led you up to it.
Sure. It's great to be with both of you and with all of you out there today. Thank you so much for the invitation. I really appreciate it. Do you want me to give you sort of a quick run up to how I ended up in Columbus, Georgia? Because it's a long and storied journey, but I can give you the micro version of it. So
Yes,
I don't know if you want to get into how I ended up as a musician or if you want to just sort of start with that assumption.
Let's start with your origin story as a musician.
Because the origin story is a little bit odd in that I find myself today a very diverse musician, being both an oboist, a conductor, a vocalist, an instrumental conductor, and a choral conductor, and an administrator, and a teacher, and so many different things. But they really do have their roots in the beginning. So my father was absolutely adored classical music. He was a German immigrant and to the United States through Canada. So he was raised listening to Brahms and Beethoven and Schubert. And so he just absolutely adored classical music. So as a young child, that's all I was hearing on the radio. Then later in life, when my mother remarried, my stepdad was an avid lover of jazz, particularly big band jazz. So by the time I got to about fourth grade, when the opportunity presented itself to want to get involved in music, I'd been exposed to it so much and in such already diverse background that I dove at the chance to take up an instrument. And then comes really the first moment, which is sort of my theme. And we've talked a little bit about this. It's about saying yes. So I started on the clarinet in fourth grade. And in the fifth grade, the choir director at my school said, "I see you're playing in the band. Would you like to come and sing in the choir?" And it was the first time I was presented with that fork in the road. I'd never sung anything in my life. I'd never even thought about singing because I'd been immersed in this instrumental world since infancy, really. But I thought, well, sure, that'll be fun. I'll try it. So in fifth grade, I also started singing in my school choir. Continuing on in band and orchestra into high school, and then singing in the choir in high school. Then comes another moment of yes, another fork in the road. I'm invited by a friend of mine during my senior year of high school to come and sing in a church choir. Well, I think you can get a sense of where we're headed here, because what I do today is church music and orchestra and band and choir. And that door was just, that invitation was opened. I said yes, again, to something I had never done before. Started singing in that church choir in high school. Decided during my senior year that I was going to major in music. I was on the fence. I was either going to go to a school and major in political science and become an attorney, or I was going to be a music major. I was really torn between the two. But it was during my senior year of high school when I was the president of the band, the drum major, a couple of leadership roles in two different choirs. I was basically a music major already my senior year. a pivotal moment happened in my senior year of high school. My high school band director got very, very sick and had to take about 3 months off. And the substitutes that they sent were not music teachers. So all of a sudden I found myself as the director of my high school band. And I was on the podium conducting my high school band while still a student. And that made me realize that I knew what I wanted to be. I wanted to be a musician. So I declined the admissions to the other college where I was going to major in poli-sci and all that. And I went off to college and majored in music. I majored in oboe performance, finished my undergraduate degree in oboe performance. And lo and behold, we come to yet another decision point. During my 5th year of college, yes, it took me 5 years to finish my bachelor's. I'm happy to admit that because I took my time, struggled a bit with some of the gen eds and had to take a couple things over again. I was not a straight A student as an undergraduate. But the point of that being, that didn't prevent me from seeking a career that has been fruitful and beautiful my whole life. I did the best I could. I got through it and I got better. But a decision point came during my 5th year of college. I was talking to my orchestra conductor, my college orchestra conductor, and he was asking me, what are you going to do after you graduate? I said, well, I might go ahead and roll into a master's program. And at the time, they then said at my undergraduate institution, if you stay here and do your master's here, it's free, full ride. Very tempting offer. But my orchestra conductor in college was an oboist also. And he had done a tour in an Air Force band, in a United States Air Force band. And he said, you ever thought about maybe trying a military band? Do something different. Planted a seed. I explored it. I looked into it. And after college, I joined the Navy. And I went into the US Navy as a musician because of that moment of him opening a door and saying, have you ever thought about something you've never done before? Why would you even consider it? Ended up joining the Navy and then spending a 22-year career in military bands. During that time, finishing a master's degree in oboe performance and then ultimately a DMA in conducting. With church music in my background, doing that all the time as this continuity, this little thread through that whole thing. In the Navy, was able to find some success by saying yes a lot. Early on in one of my very first assignments in the Navy, I had someone walk up to me and say, hey, would you be willing to conduct the band on this ceremony? I can't be there. And I said, sure, I'll try it, and did that. Started singing in a church choir. Another church said, hey, would you come direct our little choir? I said, yes. I'd never done that before. I'd never done it. And I said, yes, I'll try it. Ended up ultimately winning an audition and getting to the Naval Academy. And that allowed me some continuity and stability. And there found more and more opportunities to say yes to things I'd never tried before, which led to where I am kind of now. So after the Navy, I ended up coming to Georgia for a teaching job. And that job sort of withered away and disappeared because of I don't know if you're aware, but in Georgia, a lot of colleges are being merged together, 2 schools into one. And that created some duplication, which left me sort of out in the cold. But lo and behold, this big, beautiful church in Columbus, Georgia came calling and said, would you be interested in coming to Columbus? And I said yes again, something that I had never done before. So I left academia behind and took church music as a full-time calling. 6 months later, the director of the School of Music in Columbus at the Schwob School said, would you like to come and teach a couple of classes? And I said yes again, and that's how we met. And so here we are now. So today, yes, I'm doing St. Luke as the director of music. So I direct the choirs, the bell choirs, the children's choirs. At the Schwob School, I've been blessed to teach music theory and ear training, and now also an instrumentation class, which has been a lot of fun to teach as well. And then my affiliation with the Albany Symphony was just the luck of having landed in Albany, teaching with the conductor, getting him to know me better, him asking me if I would come and do some stuff for free, me saying yes, ultimately that turning into a small little position, which grew into a bigger position, which grew into now I am not only the assistant conductor, but also the operations manager. So I handle personnel, library, and I'm the cover conductor for all of the concerts. So I'm fully invested in that now as well. All of those things being because there was an opportunity to do something I'd never set out to do that I said yes to. I was going to be the principal oboe in some orchestra someday. That's why I majored in oboe performance. Got my master's degree in oboe performance because I knew that if I was going to eventually win this principal position in some orchestra somewhere, I would probably also want to teach at the local college. So I knew I would need a master's degree teaching oboe. And lo and behold, 30 years later, I've never been the principal oboe of any orchestra, and I have never been the oboe professor at any college. And yet those were the things I set out to do. And yet I have made a music career doing all the other things I said yes to that weren't those two things.
Yeah.
That was a long-winded conversation. Sorry about that.
It's really inspiring, and also being your student and sharing with you 2 days every week and all those years made me realize that as a musicians we have very specific goals. We want to be a soloist, we want to be a faculty professor at some university, and I have many students who come to me with the dream of I want to be the best violinist in the world. And what do you think are the kind of mistakes that hold musicians back in reaching their full potential when they are growing by having only like unilateral kind of vision for what they want to be like as a musicians?
We used to, and I mean we as musicians, all of us, because we're all the same family, right? I'm a generation ahead of you, but we are a family because we're a tiny little fraction of the population, those of us who are the musicians in this world. There was a time hundreds of years ago when a musician was a musician, not an organist, not a singer, not a composer, not a violinist, but a musician. And the idea of being the best oboist is an outstanding goal, and it's important, but it is actually a piece of a larger goal, which is to be the best musician you can be. One of the things I do a lot now is arranging choral pieces that have piano accompaniments and creating orchestra scores out of those piano accompaniments. I had no background in arranging. I had to just sit down and figure it out and try it and do something I'd never done before and then say, how am I going to make this the best it can be? I think what sometimes happens is it is not a bad thing to set the goal of being, you both violinists. There's nothing wrong with saying, I want to be the best violinist that I can possibly be. Yes, absolutely. Just put an and at the end of that sentence. I want to be the best violinist I can be and the best musician I can be with whatever comes down the road for me. And along with that comes the open heart and the open mind and the willingness to say, by becoming the best musician I can be, more doors open for me to be a musician. How many people do you know? How many people do I know who set out to be the best one thing, and it could be anything, and then ended up never doing anything in that field at all? I had a friend in high school that was committed to becoming an optometrist of all things. They were absolutely committed to it. When they didn't get into the one school that they wanted to get into, they completely dropped the idea, never went to an optometry school somewhere else, never learned, and ended up doing, just things along the way to make a living. Never had a passion for anything they did after that. I think that it may be true that you're going to become the best on that instrument in the world. But it may also be true that you're only going to become the best you can be at that thing. But it's a huge world. And the music world is gigantic. To be willing to find out all the different things you can do is part of the puzzle. Be willing to find out. When somebody asks you to do something you've never done before in the music field, just say yes. There is a ridiculous movie that has very little to do with all this called Yes Man. Mm-hmm. And the real point of it is just the opportunities that are presented to you when you just say yes. When you just say yes. And it takes, here's the thing though, it's not a compromise. It's not saying I'm not going to be the best. I mean, I'm to this day, I have oboe gigs coming up in November and December that I'm going to go play for. Well, I still have to be the best oboist I can be now. I finished my undergraduate degree in oboe performance in 1986. Think about that for a second. And I still have to take it out and practice every day now between now and November 12th to make sure that I'm the best oboist I can be for that gig. But if I was only an oboist, look at all the other things I never would have gotten to do.
Yeah.
So I would encourage the young musician to imagine the possibilities. Don't imagine only one possibility. Yes, imagine that one possibility and hold on to it fast, because the only way you ever get anywhere is visualization, right? You have to see yourself doing it. I would only ask you to also be open to other dreams happening in the middle of the night as well.
Yes.
Because you can dream other dreams too.
Yes, I'm with you. And I have a similar experience to finding something else away from just violin being fulfilling, and to do that for a whole lifetime sounds very appealing, and also it makes the other things better. So this is farther away from doing choir instead of band, but Samuel was like, let's start an organization. And it's about music, but starting an organization is not actually playing violin. And so having to sit down and figure something out that was not related to the things I've done, still I drew on experiences that I had, no matter how far away they were, to help me in my work when we were starting the foundation. And that can always be the case, because even if you haven't done something, you're not starting from zero, even when it feels good. And so I think that's also very like enlightening to hear the whole lifetime of that. It sounds incredible.
Well, and part of it too is you have to remember that there are people like me who've now done this for, I mean, if you go back to 1986, that's what, 34 years ago? So technically, I have been a working professional musician for 34 years. If you say, okay, from the time you graduate from college, you're now a working person. Remember as young musicians that people like me want to be asked. So many times I wonder, in the classroom especially, you know, there's 25, 26 students in one of the classes I'm teaching this semester. Do you know how many of them have ever asked me anything about my career? Just this semester alone? 2. Wouldn't you want to know a little more? I think one of the things that we have to remember is that there is a wealth of knowledge and information out there. One of the great things about being a teacher is what I get to learn from you guys, because I learn from you too. And that's the other piece of the puzzle, is it's a two-way street. Remember that as a young musician, while you are there to learn, you are already teaching. You are already teaching. And find the people more experienced than you, and not just let them mentor you, but you mentor them too. Because one of the things that I find and I'll say it, an old musician, is I take a lot of inspiration from you younger musicians. It keeps me fresh and new, and it makes the things I have done 1,000 times new again when I get to do them with you. So one of the things that I think is really important is to find the people in your musical life who want that back and forth. And if it's teachers, if it's other students, if it's friends, if it's you go out on a gig somewhere and you're playing with somebody you've never played with before, try to have a little conversation, find out if that's another new pathway to connectivity, because it's that connectivity that opens those doors, that reaches those forks in the road where you say yes.
Yeah.
You know, one of the reasons that when you asked me to come and talk to you today was that I said yes, was because, again, there was something I've never done before. And I said yes to it. And I'm enriched from the experience. You know, it is two-way. You know, I have always believed in the Frederick Fresnel and Leonard Bernstein approach to being a musician, which is, you know, that both of those men, when they passed away, had gigs on the books. They were working musicians to the last. It's a lifelong journey. This isn't some job we retire from at 65. You know, this is who we are. And I might be a lot older than some of you, but we're the same.
Yeah. Yeah. I have a question for you about saying yes to something that might be intimidating. And it kind of goes along. Kelly Henry, she played flute at Schwob. I don't know if you knew her. She just commented that someone told her to never aspire to be the smartest person in the room, because that's how you grow. And when you're asked to do something that you might be stepping into a role where there are other people who know more than you, but you're asked to be the leader. For example, I thought of it first when you mentioned that your high school band director was out and you stepped into that role. I'm sure even if you were the one most capable in the room, there were other students who might have thought they were more capable. And I think that that's common for us to experience, maybe less in conducting roles, but definitely in school. Like, we lead sectionals or we lead small group rehearsals. And what would be some ways that us being teachers to our peers could be effective, and also building those relationships, not doing it in a way that's comes off as arrogant or comes off as trying to insert yourself in a situation that other people don't want you to be in. Do you have any advice for students who might find themselves in those situations?
Yes, I will. There's a couple of words that come to mind right away. And one of the first words is humility. As a musician, it's important to remember that you have not learned it all. And when you get to the end of this journey, you will still not know it all. To remember what a gift it is to do what we do, and to embrace it as an opportunity and not as an achievement unto itself. The achievement is not to become a musician. That's the opportunity. The other thing the word that comes to mind is to collaborate. I was just talking to someone yesterday that one of the things I have missed the most during this pandemic has been running rehearsals. You're going to find this strange, but in many ways, I actually love the rehearsal more than the performance, because the rehearsal is the true collaboration. It's where the creative process actually happens. And if you are a student who's been tasked with running a sectional that you are a member of, that is an opportunity to create something. That's an opportunity to collaborate, not to tell people what to do. Now, I have a great deal of experience in telling people what to do because I spent 22 years in the military. I came from a culture in which you tell people what to do and they do it. Mm-hmm. And there is no conversation about that. But even under that scenario, I was placed in a position where I was having to tell people what to do who outranked me by many levels, because I was this new upstart usurper coming in and being put on the podium in front of people who had been, I got to the Naval Academy and I had only been there for 2 years, and I was put as the conductor of a concert band filled with musicians who had been in the Navy for 10 to 15 years longer than I had, who outranked me many levels above me, but I still had to lead. So I had to create a culture and an environment in which, yes, I had to make decisions, but they were done in a collaborative manner. And I think that in a situation where you are put in a leadership position that you didn't anticipate, if you can think of it more as an opportunity to collaborate, it's really just another chamber music experience, right? There's nothing more delightful than playing in a quartet or a trio or that, because of the opportunity to collaborate. Well, that can be true in those impromptu leadership roles as well. Yes, you do need to lead it and you need to make decisions, but you can do it in a way in which the purpose of doing it is not to tell people what to do. The purpose of doing it is to create something. The purpose of doing it is to collaborate, with the end being an artistic expression. So a lot of it is, you know, there's a famous psychologist, and I'm trying to remember his name now, Leo Buscaglia. Leo Buscaglia talks a lot about how we talk to ourselves. And in a leadership position, it's important to remind yourself, I'm collaborating here. I have an opportunity here. I may not be worthy of doing it, but I'm doing it anyway. And this is an opportunity for all of us to grow, to get better. So to take a humble and collaborative approach, I think will go a long way to making that a more positive experience. You might be the best musician in the room. That can happen. Just don't think that you are. It's okay if you are or not. That's not really even for you to know or say. You know, there are situations in which I find myself probably the best musician in the room. Maybe. That probably happens. But you know what? I never act as if it is. Because I don't get any better that way. Because I'm never going to reach the point where I know enough, or I'm as good as I need to be at whatever it is I'm doing. That day is never going to come. So even if I am the best musician in the room, and a lot of times I'm not, I never will be outwardly, if that makes sense.
Yes, those are all really great reminders. And even for me, thinking about leading as being decision-making and not telling, not ordering, even like that small wording is something that's helpful for me personally to think about. So
I'll give you an example. When I run a rehearsal, if I ask a section or an individual, singer or instrumentalist, to do something, I ask them to do it. Sopranos, would you please take a breath after that word? Violins, could you please play a little louder here? Cello, would you please take a little bit off? Not violins louder, cello softer. I get the same result in the moment doing it those two different ways. But what kind of relationship do I build over time with those musicians? One of the things that has been very gratifying to me is that when I work with musicians, they always want to work with me again. And I think the reason for that is because of that humility and that collaborative approach. I think that makes an environment people want to engage in again.
yes, and you're talking about virtues or describing character, but I think that's part of becoming the best musician too, is making sure that your character is developing with your musicianship so that you can build relationships with people, because music on our own is not very much. It's not very worthy, and we feel it now more than ever, being apart from each other as musicians, and the opportunities to make music really together, like next to each other, are rare now, and it is all about that. So if we as musicians are not developing those parts of ourselves too, it holds us back. I think
I'm actually, if I could just say one thing, I'm actually excited about the future. If there's one good thing that's going to come out of this pandemic, is how much more passion we are all going to have for what we do, whatever it is, when we can do it again.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're going to see a renaissance in an appreciation for art and for music and for theater and for all of those things that are on hold now, that we've taken for granted for generations. We're going to see, I think we are going to live into a new renaissance when it comes to all of that, and to be excited about it again, and to be, I mean, I've got a couple things coming up. I can't tell you how giddy I am to get in a room and make some music with people again. You know, it's going to be as if it was new again. It's going to be exciting, I think.
I have a question. As professors, how can we impact the journey of our students to become a well-rounded artist? Because in the world of colleges and universities and a little more adult kind of spectrum, is easier to identify what are the things that can benefit us and kind of decision making that we should go for. However, when we have an 11 years old student, what do you think is the most important kind of platform that we should give to the student? Should we as a professor be the ones providing the opportunity, or should we wait for them to come and create it?
When you're talking about working with students, the student-teacher relationship is a unique one in that there is a responsibility that rests with the teacher. It is not my student's job to come to me and say, how do I do this? It is my job to be open to whatever they need. The teacher has a response. One of the things that I have been disappointed in being in academia has been the perspective of so many who teach that it is the student's privilege to have them as a teacher. I think that's wrong. I think that it is more important to think of what a privilege it is that this student has come to you. And you have a responsibility now to give them your best. Their best comes from you giving yours, whether it's the classroom or the individual lesson. The teacher needs to be the giver and not the one that decides what matters to the student. That student has to feel that themselves. You will have students who want to learn to play an instrument just for the fun of it. So you be the best person to help them achieve that as possible. You will have another student who has already decided at 11 years old that they are going to, they're going to win a competition at 17. They have that kind of fire. You have a responsibility to be the best teacher you can be for that student. In other words, you have to change. You have to change to be what the student needs for you. Just like in the classroom, I have to change every semester and be something different for every class because they're all different. Samuel, you've been a student of mine in a couple of classes. I've taught those same classes other semesters, and they haven't had a completely different need. They've had a completely different dynamic. I have had to be a different person. I've had to be a different teacher for those classes. I've got a skills 1 class right now that needs me to be different than the one I had a year ago. They need me in a different way. I have to be open to the possibility that I can be a different teacher for a different student. And I think even that 11-year-old needs you to be. You might have 2 or 3 different young students who each need you to be different for them. They are not machines for you to program, right? They've come to you. So it circles back around to attitude. It's not about them conforming to what you want them to be. It's you trying to be what they need you to be, I believe.
Yeah.
The students, I have good relationships with all of the students I've had all these years, even ones coming back to me now 2, 3, 4 years later, because I was able to at least try to be what they needed me to be. What that will create is it will create more opportunities for them to figure out who they are and what direction they want to go and where they're headed. so that they're not stuck in a narrow lane and can't see outside of that. You're the first person who's going to make it possible for them to see other things and say yes to them, by you not being so narrow that you're not open to it either. You have to be able to say yes to being a different kind of teacher too. It's a collaboration. It's not a person programming you to be a certain way. It's a collaboration between what I have, what you have. What can you gain from what I have based on what you need from me? Now, it takes some intuition, it takes some sensitivity, and it takes some openness it takes some perception and some perceptibility as well. A lot of teachers, unfortunately, will do things like, for example, I know teachers who teach a particular class. We won't even get into the subject. They will write an entire curriculum down to exactly what is going to be taught every single minute of every single class an entire semester. How can you possibly know what a room full of students are going to need that semester in advance and then not waver from that because of their needs? This is why students fail classes. This is why they drop out before the midterms, because they aren't getting what they need, because you have laid a path in front of them that is so rigid that it doesn't fill the gaps they have in what they need. You've got to be adaptable to it. Sure, there are baseline things that must be taught, but beyond that are opportunities to go in different directions, to build these students up, to fill in those gaps that they need. A lot of teachers don't do that. This is the curriculum, this is what you will be able to do by the end of the semester, and these are the steps to get there. Well, they might be the steps to get there for most of them, but they might not be the steps to get there for all of them. You, as the teacher, might have to come at it from over here. I might have to teach Samuel music theory from over here, but I might have to teach somebody else the same topic this direction to make sure they understand it. I don't know yet. It's why when you look at my syllabi, they are not day, this page, this page, this day, this page, this page. They are topic driven. These are the things we're going to learn. But I don't know yet what you need. It takes time. And that's true on an individual level. If I had an OBO student come to me tomorrow, say, I want to study with you. Good. I have no idea where we're headed. So let's just start this road together and see where it takes us. Now, there's certain skill sets you're going to need. There are baselines, and we'll do those. But beyond that, I don't know if the Sibelius Concerto is going to be better for you or the Brahms. I don't know. I don't know yet, because I don't know you well enough yet. And it might be that one is the one and one is not. But don't be so rigid as a teacher that you can't adapt to what your students actually need. And that's a perception thing. You need to pay attention. You have to watch and you have to listen. Why are they there? Why are they taking lessons from you? Now, how can you be the best for them?
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. It brought up so many questions for me about being a teacher that will divert from this topic, so I'll save it for another time. But especially like the ability that you have, or not the ability, but the ability to be adaptable is also so important to being an effective educator. And it's as a music ed undergrad, that's not always how I was taught to teach, and hit over the head with lesson planning and
Yep.
how to do lesson plans, and those are not practical. And practical planning is good because you need to be purposeful and intentional, but all of those things you said really resonated with me, so I appreciate that. And I have more questions I will save for you for later. I just have one more final question, if we can go to the other side from the perspective of a student. Practically, a student right now start saying yes to opportunities, especially if they maybe don't have the privilege to have those opportunities presenting themselves? What can they do?
Well, one of the things that is so tremendous about the world today is because of things like this, of things like this internet that we're dealing with, and this technology that we have. Young people are incredibly creative. They always have been. When I was a child, I used to draw pictures of things that didn't exist. Um, we've always been creative. I think what's really, really important is to create with what you have. The creative impulse is the reason we're attracted to music. It doesn't mean we're all going to be composers, and it doesn't mean we're all going to be performers. Because there's a creative impetus to the teaching process too. That's a very creative thing, to figure out different ways of teaching that fingering or whatever it is, to be specific. But when it comes to that bigger picture of, I live in a place where there aren't opportunities to say yes to things. Absolutely, that is true all over the world. That's true right here in Columbus. In fact, it's one of the things I kind of deal with having come to Columbus, because Columbus is a place that is not as it's not as welcoming to outsiders, to new people coming in. To many people in Columbus, for example, I'm just the choir director at that church over there, and yet I have done so much more than that. So what I'm having to do is I'm having to take what I have and make something out of it, make something from it. I am never, for example, probably ever going to be able to do some of the things here in Columbus I was able to do in other places where I have lived. But there are still things I can create here, like the chamber music stuff at the church, or some other wheels I've got turning with what I have. So even if I think you are, let's take an extreme example. Let's say that I live in a small village in a small, very poor country, but my father left me a violin. There could be somebody under those circumstances, right? There have to be creative ways, even in my small town, to pick up that violin and walk out into the middle of that town and create something that wasn't happening before. Be open to the possibility that there is, and just try it. Maybe every Sunday after church, you need to be out in that square playing hymns. And the people who are coming out of the church will stop and listen for a few minutes. And all of a sudden you have a concert series 3 months down the road. I don't know. The point being, even if no one has nothing, because you have you. Mm-hmm. No one has nothing. You're born. They always say you're born and you die with nothing. That's not true, because you have you. So the hardest part is to put the first foot forward. You have to force yourself to do that. You have to say, don't focus on what you don't have, because we are all missing things that would help us along the way. And I could give you a nice long list of things I want that I don't have. I could give you a list that would go on for days, but I can also give you a list of what I do have and how I'm going to try to use that. Even if that's all there is. We all have something, because we all have ourselves. It doesn't matter how far we get, and it doesn't matter how big what we create becomes. What matters is that we do something with the time we're given. Make something of it, because it's the making that matters. It's not the end. That's why I love rehearsal so much more than the concert, right? Because it is the rehearsal in which we make. It's almost as if the concert is not even the most important part. We're making something, we're creating. And it comes back around to that creative impetus again. So you might be in a little town with nothing but this violin that somebody left you. I'm just using that as an example because we used it already. that might be all you have. But if you're watching this, you have more than that already, don't you? Because you have access to a bigger world. And one of the things I like about what you guys are doing with your foundation is you're taking this bigger world and bringing it into places that probably never realized they could reach outside like that. So bravo to you for doing that.
Thank you.
And I think that what is so powerful about your message is that everything starts from wanting and desiring something, being moved by that passion to be able to create something.
Well, I think part of that, I have to give credit to my parents. My parents are immigrants. They, you know, at 19 and 20 years old with a little baby in their arms, left their country, got on a ship, and went across the Atlantic Ocean to a land they had never been, that speaks a language they'd never heard, with nothing but what was in a suitcase, and had to create something from that nothing. Well, it wasn't nothing, was it? It was something. It was enough to start. And that's the thing. They had to put their foot forward. They had to pick up that left foot and move it forward. You have to do something. Don't just sit there, because then you don't do anything.
Well, this was very encouraging, and I think a beautiful place to press pause, not end. We will continue.
Yes, please do have me back. I'd love to talk more. We probably should get into a whole discussion about just music education.
Yes. But thank you for speaking with us, and thank you for speaking to all the people.
Absolutely. What a pleasure. Thank you so much.
We are very honored to have you and very honored to have your time. It is a huge gift. Thank you.
It's my pleasure.
Thank you so much. And also in the name of all those musicians who are watching us from South America and that one day dream to have a teacher and an experience with someone like you. So in the name of all my students, my colleagues, and all the people that is supporting us, I'm really grateful for this time and for that legacy that you also are leaving us as students.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
We'll be
Have a good rest of the day.
absolutely.